Hey everybody, my name's Aaron. I'd like to welcome you to my channel, Positive by Negative, where we're taking that dark spiritual coal and alchemizing it into shiny spiritual diamonds that we can use for our growth and development in this crazy world of ours. And what I want to talk about today is, one of our best teachers in this particular facet of existence, and that's other people. It's been said, I don't know where, by whom, but I've seen it written before that, hell is other people. And, that's definitely one way to look at it. I mean, other people can be difficult. Other people can be frustrating. Other people can be, just mind-blowingly rude and stuff occasionally. And so I can understand why some people think of it that way. Like, that dealing with other people can, for some people, literally be hell. And I get that. But, I tend to think of it more that other people can be our best teachers, our best, source of development. And it's because we're all different. We're all different. And in this school and gym that we call Earth, the whole purpose of us coming here is to learn and to grow and to get stronger. And the only way we really do that is by resistance. It's kind of, just like going to the gym. You go to the gym, you lift weights, and you do that for resistance, so you can grow your muscles and you can bulk up and whatever, And so that's kind of the whole point of being here, is to have that work against with other people and institutions and things. And so, when we are on the other side with Source, we tend to be grouped with our soul family, a group of souls and beings that are at a similar level of consciousness as us, that, have a very similar experience in existence. And everybody's happy and good, and it's very supportive, and everybody's very loving, and it's great, but not much progress or growth can be made in those kind of conditions when, everybody's kind of the same mindset and of the same, level of consciousness. And so one of the biggest gifts that we've been given by Source is this time that we get to spend on Earth. And it's because we get to spend it with other people who are beings from all levels of consciousness, of all levels of awakening, all levels of skill and ability and cultures. And we, kind of choose to come here so we can interact with those other people, that are different from us and, do different things and think differently, and, as a way for us to grow. So that's kind of like the whole point of us being here, and other people are great. They can be a mirror for ourselves, especially for our own bad behavior. I think of, annoying things that people do that, make me kind of think about myself. Like on this last 4th of July, there was somebody shooting off fireworks till 2 a.m, and I was irritated for a little bit. But then I got to thinking about it. When I was like drinking and drugging, I was the kind of guy who would keep going until like the sun came up. And there was a lot of people that had to put up with that for me. And so instead of getting mad about it, I kind of can use an experience like that as a way to, kind of examine my own behavior and where I've been and how I've grown. And so, it's still annoying. I mean, I'm not going to get around that, but we can always kind of look at those things that other people do as a way to learn something. I mean, everything in life is a learning experience and a growing experience, but, particularly other people, like, they tend to mirror our own bad behaviors and habits. And a lot of times, if there's something that you see somebody else doing that you find irritating or objectionable, a lot of times it's because that's part of, your own psyche that you're not very pleased with on maybe a subconscious level. They always say when you point at somebody, you got 3 fingers pointing back at you. And that's true. Like anytime that we're pointing at somebody else, we need to look inside and see what it is that's within us that is causing us to be, angry or irritated or annoyed or whatever it is, because chances are it's something that's within us and stuff. And so, if we can look at it that way, if we can look at our dealings with other people as a learning experience, as opposed to, something that's just inherently annoying or irritating, we can learn a lot from that. And to do that, though, we have to understand that everybody comes here for that reason. Everybody is here, for the purpose of growing and learning and having these experiences. And some people are, new souls that are maybe have never or have only had a few earthly incarnations. There's people who are old souls out there that are probably, this far away from, enlightenment and, or, maybe just in their last few incarnations here. There's people that may have been incarnated from star seeds that have never had a life here on Earth, but have come from other, galaxies and stuff like that. And that's where, light workers a lot of times come from, is we volunteered to be here for this awakening in human consciousness. And so, it's important to understand that, like, everybody's here in their own time, their own mission, and they act and behave from their level of consciousness or unconsciousness, as the case may be. And so, when we can think of it that way, we can be a lot more compassionate and patient and, appreciative for what we can learn from other people, because, we're all just here doing the best we can. I am of the opinion that the vast majority of people are good. They don't have any intention of doing bad things or making bad decisions or doing anything, just to be like a general drain or anything like that. It's just people do what makes sense to them from their level of consciousness, from their level of awakening, and then we can work with them to help learn what they need to learn. So this is all for us. All this stuff that people do, and that we deal with other people is for mutual benefit. It's for them to learn, it's for us to learn. So I just think that one of the most amazing things about this life on Earth is that we can learn from literally anyone. We can learn from positive role models what we do want to be. We can learn from negative role models what we don't want to be. I when I was new in the 12-step rooms and stuff, I saw a lot of what I didn't want to be, in sobriety and in recovery. But I also saw a lot of what I did want to be. And so, we can take those interactions with just about anybody as a lesson. Some of the most important lessons I've learned in my life have been from my kids. My 5-year-old teaches me every day to just relax and let go and have fun and quit taking everything so seriously and actually live life, and I'm eternally grateful to her for that, and a lot of people think that you can't learn from kids, but absolutely you can. I mean, they're here to teach us, compassion and openness and spontaneity and fun and imagination and all the great things about life. So, there's nobody that we can't learn something from, and everybody, like I said, is just here doing the best they can, and really trying to make their way in this world the best way they know how. And so we can be compassionate to that, and with that, we have to understand that ultimately we are all a part of the same organism. We're all an aspect of God. Like right now on the earth, the divine has 8 billion or so sets of eyes and ears that the divine is experiencing itself and in this creation with. And so, we are all, in the eyes of Source, equal. We're all cells in the organism, and for that reason, we can kind of use that as a barometer for ourselves. Like if we're noticing that we're feeling inferior or superior to anyone, we can kind of analyze where that's coming from and say, at the end of the day, we're both, got red blood cells flowing through us. We both have to eat, both have to sleep, and there's nothing inherently inferior or superior about either one of us, and so, it makes dealing with people a lot easier. And me, myself, anytime that I get to feeling too superior to anybody, I just remember like, okay, I'm feeling like my ego is getting a little big, and it's big talk coming from somebody who once threw up in somebody's mailbox, walking home from a bar. So, I'm in no position to, to be judgmental of anybody else. I've certainly had my share of foibles and mistakes and dumb things that I've done and stuff. And so, if we can approach our interactions with other people from a place of humility, and understand that we are ultimately all equal, and from a place of compassion and curiosity, it's amazing to me how if you're just curious and ask people their points of view and their thoughts on things and opinions, it's amazing what you learn. You know, everybody's got a lesson to teach you. Everybody's got a struggle that they're dealing with, and you know, if we can you know, talk to them about it, then you know, we can help them, we can help ourselves, and everybody's learning, you know. And this is an amazing part of life and stuff. And so, you know, I know that the anonymity vacuum of the internet and of comments on stories and on social media and stuff like that have made the level of discourse between people really rough at times. And it's because, you know, when you're not looking somebody in the eye, it's a lot easier to say mean things and say stuff that really aren't part of your true nature. So we always have to keep that in mind too. You know, if somebody's like, you know, trolled us online or something like that, like, you know, you have to remember the fact that they probably wouldn't say that to you in real life. You know, they might think it and stuff, but they might not, they would probably not say that to you. Like, you know, people in general, I think, are a lot nicer and more compassionate in person than they are online, you know, and, you know, the difficult people in our lives, we should, you know, it's tempting to say we should, you know, be grateful even for the difficult people in our lives. And what I would really say is that we should be grateful, especially for the difficult people in our lives, because they're the ones who challenge our beliefs. They're the ones who challenge our opinions and make us look inside and examine ourselves and be like, whoa, do I really believe that? Is that really something that is part of me and stuff? And so, you know, some of the most valuable lessons I've learned in my life have been from some of the most difficult people I've ever met in my life. I've had coworkers that were incredibly difficult, but looking back, you know, I'm glad that I ran across them because I learned a lot of lessons, you know. My stepdad and I didn't get along at all. Like, you know, my life was amazing. Well, I shouldn't say amazing, but it was going a very specific and good way up until I was 11 years old and he came into my life. And then, you know, it was sort of like everything just kind of went downhill. But had that not happened, you know, I wouldn't have the depth of character to be where I am today. I mean, having that work against and resistance in my life led me to a path that ultimately was good. So, you know, I really have to thank him for that. I mean, he's gone now, but looking back, I can see the value of that conflict and that, you know, just general tension that we had between us and stuff. You know, it wasn't a wasted effort, as is nothing else in life, you know. And so I think if we can just look at our interactions with other people, you know, through a very objective and 30,000 foot view, and understand that, you know, these people come into our lives, and I always say, you know, they come in, and I'm sure I heard this at a 12-step meeting or something like that, but I've always heard that, you know, people come in for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. You know, there's certain people who come into your life to help you learn a very specific lesson. There are some people that might come into your life for a period of time, say like, you know, if you work somewhere for 10 years and stuff, and you have a kind of a set of people that, you know, you kind of interact with a lot during that time, and then after you leave, you never really connect with them again. And then there's those people that are there for your entire life. You know, it could be family members. In my case, my best friend and I have been best friends since the first day of first grade, you know, 40 some odd years ago. And he's always just been part of my life. And so, you know, clearly we had some kind of a soul contract to just be in each other's lives forever. And so, you know, but on the reverse of that, though, is that, you know, with those people who are just there for a reason in a season, you know, those people may fall away out of our lives. We may outgrow each other. We may drift apart. We may, you know, just not connect anymore. We may not resonate with each other. And that's okay. You know, that's okay. You know, there is definitely a purpose behind all of this. And so, you know, I just encourage us all, before we get too, you know, too irritated with one another, or, you know, make judgments about each other or anything, just remember that we're all people. We're all human, you know, and everywhere in the world that you go, you know, it's just people. You know, even the nation that seems like we're the most at war with and everything like that, or we have, you know, the biggest conflict with, if you actually met their citizens, they're cool. You know, they're not their government. They're not their politicians. And so, you know, it's so important for us to remember that we're all humans. We're all here doing the best we can. We're all here with our own mission in life, and we're all here to help each other ultimately, you know, and stuff. So that's my challenge to myself, and I challenge you to, you know, really go out into the world and have a different sort of objective view of what it is you're learning from other people, you know, when they're acting as a mirror, when they're acting as a direct lesson, when they're helping you, when you're helping them, you know, what did we learn from all this? So, you know, this is all this is for us. It's not done to us. So anyway, that's all I have for today. You know, I have a lot to say on this subject. I'm sure I will do more videos on the subject of dealing with other people and stuff. But for now, it kind of seems like a good place to park it. But anyway, you know, if you resonated with this, give me a subscribe, give me a like. If not, you know, we can always be friends in some other facet of life. I'm not offended. So anyway, wishing everybody another happy 24, and I'll see you next time.